the discovery of the forbidden cave high above the valleys of Guerrero, Mexico, where clouds cling to the jagged peaks of the Sierra Madre del Sur. There lies a place few dare to enter. The locals call it Tlioc, the Cave of Badgers. For generations, villagers had whispered its name with caution, believing it to be haunted or cursed. Some said strange lights flickered from within on stormy nights. Others swore they heard whispers echoing from the depths. But for centuries, no one ventured beyond its entrance. At nearly 700–800 feet above sea level, Tlioc was more than just a cave. It was a mystery sealed by time itself. The people of Baguano, a small mountain community nearby, treated it as both a source of life and a place of fear. The waters that flowed from its depths nourished the crops and quenched the thirst of generations, yet no one had ever dared to explore the darkness beyond the first few meters. To them, it was sacred, the domain of something ancient and powerful. But all that changed when Katya Pavlova, an accomplished speleologist from Russia, arrived in Guerrero. Known for her daring explorations and precise cave mapping across Europe and Latin America, Pavlova had dedicated her life to unveiling the secrets that the Earth hid beneath its surface. Her name was already associated with several groundbreaking discoveries, from the crystalline caverns of Mexico's Naka mine to underwater tunnels in the Yucatan. But Tlioc was different. It wasn't fame that drew her, it was curiosity. The cave had barely been mentioned in scientific records, and no modern explorer had ever mapped it. When Pavlova heard about it from a local geologist in Chilpancingo, she felt that magnetic pull only true explorers understand, that burning question of what if. She assembled a small team, but when most backed out due to rumors of danger and curses, she decided to go with just one local guide, a quiet, resilient man named Mateo, who knew the mountains better than anyone else. Their goal was simple on paper, to map the unrecorded passages of the Tlioc cave system. But what they found would rewrite history. The journey to the entrance, the expedition began before sunrise. Pavlova and Mateo trekked through narrow goat trails, their heavy packs filled with gear, oxygen tanks, waterproof cameras, ropes, lamps, and geological tools. The terrain was merciless. Dense vegetation clawed at their legs, while hidden gullies threatened to swallow every careless step. The air grew thinner as they climbed, and the only sounds were the cries of distant hawks and the crunch of their boots on loose rock. After nearly 6 hours, they reached the entrance, a jagged mouth opening into the mountainside, half hidden by moss and shadows. Pavlova paused, taking in the eerie silence. Cold air drifted from within, damp and heavy, smelling faintly of minerals and age. "Are you sure no one's been here?" she asked. Mateo nodded. "Not since my grandfather's time. People say the cave belongs to the gods." She smiled faintly. "Then, let's hope the gods don't mind visitors." They donned their helmets, switched on their headlamps, and stepped inside. Into the depths, the first chamber was large but unremarkable, smooth limestone walls streaked with mineral veins that shimmered under the light. Water trickled down from above, forming small pools that mirrored the glow of their lamps. But as they pressed deeper, the cave began to change. The passages narrowed, twisting like the veins of a sleeping giant. About 200 feet in, they encountered their first major obstacle, a flooded tunnel. The ceiling dipped so low that there was barely 6 inches of space between the water's surface and the rock above. The air smelled stagnant, and ripples distorted their reflections like a warning. "What can turn back?" Mateo said uneasily. Pavlova shook her head. "If no one has crossed this, then what lies beyond may still be untouched." She unpacked her scuba gear, checked her regulator, and slowly submerged. The water was icy, cutting through her suit like knives. Her light pierced through the blackness, revealing undisturbed silt and formations that looked like ancient fingers reaching from the floor. For several agonizing seconds, the passage seemed endless. Then, suddenly, the rock above lifted, and she emerged into an open chamber. When Matteo followed, his gasp echoed across the stone walls. They stood in a vast cavern, silent, colossal, and utterly pristine. No footprints, no modern markings. Just untouched earth, sealed away for centuries. Their lights illuminated stalactites hanging like teeth from the ceiling and stalagmites rising like guardians from the ground. It was here, 500 feet into the cave, that history waited for them. The discovery, at first, what caught Pavlova's eye seemed like trash. In one corner of the chamber, a small cluster of objects lay half buried in dust. They looked like broken shells, stones, maybe even modern debris washed in by the flood. But something about their arrangement, neat, circular, deliberate, felt wrong. She knelt and brushed away the sediment with gloved hands. Her breath caught. These weren't random objects. They were artifacts, ancient, delicate, and unmistakably human-made. She and Matteo began to clear the area carefully. What emerged stunned them both: 4 shell bracelets, each meticulously carved, a massive decorated snail shell gleaming faintly under the light, 2 stone discs and 6 fragments of similar design, and finally, a piece of carbonized wood. The artifacts had been placed in a circle, looped carefully around small, rounded stalagmites, as if in ritual or offering. Pavlova whispered, "This wasn't left by accident." The realization hit them. They were standing inside a sacred site, untouched since before the Spanish conquest. The arrangement, the craftsmanship, the preservation, everything pointed to ritualistic intent. Matteo, visibly shaken, crossed himself. "Saidora, we should not move them." Pavlova nodded. "You're right. We'll record everything and contact IAH." She photographed every angle, took detailed notes, and marked the GPS coordinates. The cave's natural isolation had protected these objects for hundreds of years, and she knew that even a single careless touch could destroy invaluable evidence. Calling in the experts, when Pavlova and Matteo emerged from Tliuk, their clothes soaked and bodies trembling from exhaustion, they carried something far greater than physical fatigue. They carried history. Within hours, she contacted the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, Mexico's premier archaeological authority. Her report sparked immediate interest. Within a week, a team of archaeologists, divers, and conservators arrived in Baquano, ready to verify the discovery. Led by Dr. Enrique Soles, an expert in Mesoamerican ritual sites, the team followed Pavlova's exact route. The flooded passage posed a severe challenge. Any mistake could ruin the artifacts or endanger the divers. After careful preparation, they succeeded in reaching the inner chamber. When they saw the collection, even Solis was speechless. "This," he whispered, "is something we have never seen before." Each artifact was delicately removed, sealed in protective containers, and transported to a conservation lab. Pavlova watched in silence, knowing her discovery had opened a door into a forgotten world. The analysis begins weeks later. Under controlled laboratory lights, the artifacts revealed their secrets. The shell bracelets, once cleaned, displayed intricate designs etched into their surfaces, swirling motifs, spiral patterns, and geometric symbols. 3 bracelets bore an S-shaped figure, while another displayed a human-like profile, stylized yet deliberate. These were not mere decorations, they were messages, perhaps sacred symbols or records of myth. Archaeologists dated the artifacts using carbon analysis from the charred wood. The results were stunning. Between 8950 and 1521, placing them firmly within the post-classic period of Mesoamerican history. This was the era of the Aztec Empire's rise, the height of Mixtec artistry, and the waning glory of the Maya. Yet the style of these objects did not match any known culture. The team had uncovered evidence of an unknown civilization. They named it the Tauchua culture, after the nearby town of Totepeque. Whispers of a lost civilization. For centuries, Mesoamerica's historical narrative had been dominated by the great empires, the Aztecs, Maya, Zapotec, and Mixtec. But these artifacts didn't fit into any of their traditions. The Tauchua's craftsmanship was simpler yet symbolic, spiritual in a distinct way. The cave's remote location suggested a people living in isolation, developing their own rituals and identity. The absence of human remains or written language added to the mystery. No codices, no temples, no burial mounds. Just these delicate offerings in the belly of a mountain. It was as if the Tochua had intentionally hidden their sacred world from the surface. Dr. Souls theorized that the cave was a ritual gateway, a place where priests or shamans performed ceremonies tied to fertility, harvest, or rebirth. The use of shells, often associated with water and creation myths across Mesoamerica, hinted that the Tochua viewed Tlaloc as a portal to the underworld or the womb of the earth. Pavlova, reflecting on her experience, later said in an interview, "When I was inside that chamber, it didn't feel like a place of death. It felt like a place of memory, as if the walls themselves were whispering stories we no longer remember." A cave frozen in time back in Guerrero, the news spread like wildfire. Reporters called it the cave that time forgot. Local elders felt vindicated. They had always believed the cave was sacred. Scientists, meanwhile, realized that the discovery could reshape the understanding of regional prehistory. The rugged terrain and flooded chambers that had once deterred explorers had, ironically, preserved the Tochua's legacy. Every droplet of mineral water that sealed those artifacts in stone had acted as a guardian, protecting their memory through the centuries of conquest, disease, and destruction that erased so many indigenous histories. What began as a routine expedition had become a bridge to a civilization the world had never known existed. The mystery deepens, but the discovery of the artifacts was only the beginning. Beneath the triumph lay a haunting question: who were the Tochua and why did they vanish? Archaeologists could only speculate. Perhaps they were a small highland tribe who fled the turmoil of warring states. In the months that followed, new surveys were launched around the region. Ground-penetrating radar that Mexican government declared it a protected archaeological site, closing it to the public. Pavlova returned several times, not as an explorer now, but as a witness to history. Standing before the same flooded passage where she once risked her life, 500 years of darkness lifted for a moment, and we glimpsed a civilization that the earth itself had tried to remember. The lost civilization beneath the mountain. The artifacts retrieved from the depths of Tlaloc Cave were unlike anything Mexico's archaeological community had seen before. When Katya Pavlova's discovery reached the laboratories of the National Institute of Anthropology and History, either traveled great distances or were part of trade networks that spanned from the Pacific coast to the high mountains. Under magnification, faint carvings emerged, spirals, flowing lines, and strange symbols. 3 of the bracelets featured an S-shaped design, smooth and symmetrical. Another bore the profile of a human. These artifacts didn't belong to any known culture, a civilization without a name at first. INAH researchers compared the Tlaloc artifacts to pieces from the Aztecs, Mixtec, Zapotec, and even the Purépecha civilizations that had. The Tlaloc collection defied classification. The craftsmanship was distinct, not as ornate as Aztec goldwork, nor as mathematically precise as Mayan art. It was simpler but deeply symbolic. There were no written records, no codices, no known descendants, and no oral traditions that clearly mentioned them. It was as though the Totowa had been erased from the map of memory. The language that time erased languages in Mesoamerica were the lifeblood of culture: Nahuatl, Mix, Zapotec, Maya, and countless dialects tied to identity and worldview. Yet for the Tochua there was nothing. Not a single word or inscription survived. Some linguists speculated that they're only for time to erase their voices entirely. To the archaeologists, every artifact became a clue in decoding the Tochua worldview. The spiral motifs on the bracelets might represent water or rebirth, recurring themes in Mesoamerican cosmology. The carved human face could depict a deity, or perhaps a priest during ritual trance. The stone discs might have been altars, markers, or ceremonial offerings, aligned with the agricultural calendar. It was clear that the Tochua saw the cave not just as a physical space, but as a bridge between worlds. The sacred geography of Tliuk, in pre-Hispanic belief systems, caves were not merely holes in the ground. They were sacred wombs of the earth, portals to the underworld and gateways to the divine. The Maya called them Xibalba, the Aztecs called them Mictlan, and across countless cultures, they symbolized the place where life and death intertwined. The Tochua, it seemed, shared this ancient reverence. Tliuk's geography made it an ideal ritual site. Hidden, silent, and nearly inaccessible, it required devotion and courage to reach. This was not a place for common worship. It was a sanctuary for the chosen few, likely priests, shamans, or leaders who performed rites for fertility, harvest, and the cycles of creation. The presence of shell artifacts in a highland cave suggested symbolic intent. In Mesoamerican cosmology, shells represented water, fertility, and birth, elements connected to the female aspect of the universe. By placing them deep underground, the Tochua were possibly enacting rituals of renewal, returning offerings to the womb of the earth in exchange for life above. The carbonized wood also held meaning. Tests revealed traces of resin and organic compounds consistent with copal, a sacred incense used for centuries in ceremonies. When burned, it produced aromatic smoke believed to carry prayers to the gods. This meant that at some point, perhaps 500 or 600 years ago, a group of Tochua priests descended into that cave, lit fires, offered shells, and prayed in the flickering light. Their chants must have echoed off the walls, mingling with the dripping of water and the heartbeat of the earth. Then, when their rituals ended, they left their sacred objects behind, never to return. A people without a trace. The most heartbreaking mystery of all was what happened to them. The Tochua appeared suddenly in the archaeological record, and disappeared just as quickly. There were no graves, no settlements, no evidence of warfare or migration. It was as though they, heading the past through science, modern technology brought new tools to decode the mystery. Using isotopic analysis, scientists examined the shells to determine their origin. The results were surprising. The shells came from Strumbus gigas, a species native to the Caribbean coast, hundreds of miles away. This single discovery changed everything. It proved that the Tochua were not isolated mountain dwellers as once thought. They were connected to trade networks that spanned great distances, linking the highlands of Guerrero to the coasts of the Caribbean and the Pacific. This suggested a level of organization, communication, and sophistication previously unimagined for a supposedly minor culture. The charred wood underwent microresidue analysis, which confirmed traces of copal resin and plant oils used in ritual fires. The stone discs were tested for pigment, and faint remnants of red ochre were found, possibly used to anoint offerings or mark ceremonial boundaries. Each discovery layered the picture of the Tochua civilization piece by piece, like restoring a shattered fresco. The spiritual world of the Tochua. Through these clues, archaeologists began reconstructing the Tochua's belief system, not in words, but in symbols. To them, life and earth were inseparable. Water, stone, and fire were sacred elements, each representing a force of creation. Their cave rituals likely honored agricultural cycles, planting, rain, and harvest, or transitions between life and death. In Tochua cosmology, the earth was alive, breathing through caves, feeding through rivers, and dreaming through mountains. The stalagmites around which they looped their shell bracelets might have symbolized reverberations through modern Mexico. The profound effect on the people of Guerrero. Local communities began to reclaim interest in their ancestral lands. Elders from Batguano and nearby towns visited the INH labs to view the objects, some weeping as they saw them. "Maybe these were our ancestors," one said softly. For decades, history books had focused on the great civilizations, the empires of the plains and valleys. The highlands were often dismissed as peripheral, but the Tochua changed that narrative. They proved that even the quietest corners of the world held stories of resilience, creativity, and spiritual depth. In Mexico City, museums began discussions about creating an exhibit dedicated to the hidden peoples of the Sierra Madre. Pavlova, who had returned to Europe, was invited to speak about her experience. "We think of discovery as conquest," she said in her speech, "but in truth, discovery is listening to the echoes of those who once lived, and letting them speak again." And the unanswered questions yet, for all the revelations, the Tochua remain an enigma. Who were their gods? What did they call themselves? What became of their children? Without written language, much of their identity is lost forever. But through science, art, and intuition, a faint outline emerges of a people who found holiness not in empire, but in nature, who built no pyramids because the mountains themselves were their temples, who wrote no books because the earth was their scripture. In the flickering torchlight of Tlayac Cave, they left behind their prayers,